in Hong Kong, and 10 years later you find yourself in a new place. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the reasons why I ended up in Hong Kong, the things that have happened, the business that I've managed to create there, and also within that show you a bit of the creative process that my studio works with. And then you'll know a little bit more about how I design things. So this was the beginning of a really bizarre journey for me, because I was working in London originally, and I got a little bit sort of bored at the prospect that I was going to end up working for all of these European companies for the rest of my life. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just seemed like the story was already there. A lot of people had done it before and sort of become art directors of these companies. So I really was looking for a new journey. Anyway, I'd been working quite a lot in Taiwan at the time, and I was on the Star Ferry, which is a small boat, which is the only thing that's not been renovated in Hong Kong still, because you probably can't build on it. And this guy came up to me and said, "I recognize you, you're the designer, aren't you?" And he said, "Look, I've got a watch company, I make watches for people, do you want to do a watch?" And I never wore a watch because, I've got one there, but, up to that point, because I don't like watch design. For me, watch design is fairly revolting. It's sort of, the Baroque meets sort of Versace, and I just can't get my head around the heritage of the watch business at all. So I designed something. I went back to Brussels, where I was having a studio at the time, and designed this watch, which is the simplest way I could design a watch. And it accidentally became a really sort of cult watch. People were tearing it off my wrist. I made it only for myself. And it started selling in thousands of units. And it made me realize that this flexibility in Hong Kong was ridiculous. I couldn't do that from Shoreditch or Brussels or wherever. I designed that watch. I don't spend very long designing. I'm a fairly lucid person when it comes to the things that I do. They sent it back to me in 3 weeks, prototype. And I thought, this is how I can operate at speed, I think. And although I look like I don't think very quickly, somehow I do, I don't know. So anyway, this made me think there's something going on that no one's taking advantage of. And then, at the same time, I was working for some friends of mine who were directing a company in New York called Kiki de Montparnasse, which was an adult kind of underwear shop. And they asked me if I could design them a sex toy. So I was out in Hong Kong at the time, and I designed this vibrator, which was a really rare opportunity for a designer to get to work on that, because actually, in fact, the people doing the testing were two lesbians in New York, and it was, freaked me out really. And but what I did was I could do this because I went to a factory, a sex toy factory, and they just said, "No problem, we can make this really easily." So, here I am in Hong Kong again. I was going to make it into a torch. You can see that's a little light on the end. But that got vetoed at one of the meetings. So I managed to get the little light on the end here. I'm not going to go too much into the sort of the design aspect of it. But other than to say, what it made me realize is that I've got flexibility in Hong Kong as well. I can make these beautiful shapes very easily, and everyone is really enthusiastic. When I was working in London, everyone was on a tea break all of the time. It was really difficult to get things done, and it just drove me crazy. Of course, as a self-employed designer, you have to be driven. I've failed all my exams at school more than 5 times. So my way to survive is purely by making things like this. So I put this picture in because this was what I was left with in England. This is for an exhibition by Established & Sons, great company, but you can see the difference. When I'm in England, I'm in a country with low levels of technology, so everything has to become more about the ideology or the idea as opposed to the product, because this is a writing desk which has been reinterpreted, but it's all flat, it's been cut out, bit of fabric on the back, so it's a very simple product because that's all I've got the access to the manufacturing for. Nicely displayed, but that's really when I started to begin to think I have to improve my ways of designing. I have to be in a place that's going to offer me that facility. going back just really to Europe, at the same time as all of that, you know, what's important is countries like Sweden. This chair for Swedish called Avalon, which is actually named after. I had a stint in Avalon in Palm Beach for a while. This is a really heavily invested product. You can see the shape and the form. It's got good tooling. This will be around for 20 years. And the important thing is, if you design and invest in the product, it's harder to copy. It means that it will build economy. So that company gets more heritage, it gets economy. So there was a number of different reasons in my thinking of how I should start to work. Because if I design something that's just a little cut flat thing, it gets copied, and that's become part of the culture of this company, Swedish, and it becomes important for the country. I'm not saying this is important for Sweden. It just it contributes really beautifully to economy. And the same again, you know, this is for a Portuguese bottle company. Rather than just putting the olive oil in a normal bottle, they would build the heritage of the brand by asking a designer to design a bottle, and now they've got something which is very historical for the family and for the company. My computer's just knocked off. I have a few. Okay, I just need to know what's coming because otherwise I get confused, and I've got to plan ahead while I'm talking. So anyway, that just wanted to put that as sort of in place of my thinking at the time. So here we come to what really sort of started driving me forward. This is a really beautiful image for me. I'm completely, this is more how I think, okay? It's complete chaos in some ways, but it's in complete order. And for me, this was a really beautiful image. So what I started to do when I was walking down the streets of Hong Kong was investigate how to work with in a new way. And I started to, I'm used to pressing my computer and I'm pressing this thing. So what I did was I started experimenting by folding paper. And this is a table made out of tiny bits of folded paper in China. And for me, a lot of people could say, okay, China's slave labor. It's actually a craft-based product. You've got to remember that. This is made elegantly folded and creates economy. And it's not cheap to do this stuff. This is, for me, as Asian craft. Ironically, sort of at the time, you know, you couldn't sell this in China, okay? You can't pull the wool over someone's lifting. You pull something over something. But when you export this product to Europe, it becomes beautifully craft-driven and inaccessible. So I started making things like this and exporting them to Europe. When the US dollar collapsed, then I thought, here's another opportunity. So I started making them out of cash. And so I still make these for galleries around the world, and it's a really good way to launder money because you can literally just make a piece of furniture and then send it as an art piece, and no questions. Yeah, I mean they're quite hard to unfold, but you know, as long as the IRS don't hear about this talk, we'll be fine. And I also started making clocks and things out, and these are more gallery pieces, but this was immediately the influence China had on me. This is called the Chinese Times, and I make editions of these clocks. They're all sold now. So I started, I guess, getting more involved in the system of China and the things that are going on there, which is pretty hard. And I started using these things to design restaurants. I'm not going to talk about interior design. Interior design for me is a headache. It's a whole load of problems going wrong all of the time. So I tend to avoid interior design projects. I'm designing a restaurant in Paris for the first time in a few years, but you can see this is, these panels are 30,000 little bits of folded paper, and all I did was pixelate some images on a computer, send it to the paper folding factory, and they came back with these incredible things. You can see this one fell apart while they were trying to install it. They took months and months to make. But anyway, this, for me, I found a really sense of richness in both manufacturing and craft-based work. And what I discovered was really my interpretation of the working ethic in China is they're hard workers. There's no welfare system, so people fight to work and to live and support the families. And for me, that's really, I was born in the north of England, and it's the kind of way I was brought up, really, without qualifications. If you want to live, you've got to work hard. And I really believe in that because I find countries that are over-regulated creates a lack of stimulation. So that's pretty much another reason for me to leave England. Although I do miss England, it wasn't really giving me what I wanted. So if you combine really those experiences with this project, it really started to set things on fire. I think it must have been around 6 years ago, Giant Bicycle, which is the largest bike company in the world, asked me if I would help them set up a design division, because the sports market in bicycles is really, let's just call it sports fashion. You know, people who wear lycra and go on bicycles, that's the fashion. It's not really sport. So they need to develop the design side of the business. So I had a contract for 3 years to go to Taichung from Hong Kong once a month for 3 years to teach their design teams how to design. I think you can't really teach that. It's more about an experience, a spontaneous thing. So what I did was, I said to them, look, I actually said to the CEO, I don't know anything about bicycles, and he says, that's why you've got the job, Michael, because he didn't want someone who knew how to design a bike to bring that into the bike world. Why would they? There's thousands of bike designers. So my vision for that project was to design a bike that was really normal, that people would say, oh, this is not a crazy bike a designer's designed. I want respect from the bike industry, not the design industry. So I designed this very simple, detailed bike. But I said to them, because they didn't understand the design market, so I said to them, look, I will get you €2 million worth of advertising revenue if you invest in a bike I actually want to design for the next project. So they said, if you get us €2 million worth of advertising revenue, then we'll put more money into the next project. So what I did was, because of course I'm from the design world, I've got a lot of different connections with media. So what I did was, I basically, a few details. A lot of these are patents, and every patent I've ever designed has been copied. It's really bizarre. That headlight tube actually was the beginning of about another 100 bikes putting lights in the head tube. Anyway, what I did, I got my friend who's the PR director of Lacoste to put me in a hotel room in Tokyo for 2 days, put a bicycle, invite all of the most important magazines in there, and get them the media they wanted. So this was also something really important about Asia, because what I realized is that because of my history, what they can't buy is this communication value